Being in the zone versus zoning out. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Chi Life. In the different Qigong courses that I run at Long White Cloud Qigong, one of the things that is often a part of these courses is that we have live Q&A sessions where we talk, the course participants can ask questions and we can clarify different details or aspects of practice, and we also just share experiences together as we work through the practices, and so we can gain a richer understanding and appreciation of them. And in one of these recent Q&A sessions, within that session, this topic of zoning out and being in the zone came up in relationship to some of the practices that we've been working on. And I think some quite interesting and useful ideas or observations came out of that conversation. So I thought I'd share some of those with you while you also get to share a little bit of a walk with me today. So most of us, I think, are probably familiar with what it means to zone out and what it feels like to zone out. We can probably all remember doing that at different points in time. Some of us are probably quite familiar with being in the zone, or what we're talking about with that. Sometimes some people don't really know what that's referring to, but if you understand zoning out, you're also pretty close to understand what being in the zone is as well, because they're actually not that different from each other. There are some small differences, and we'll talk about that a little bit in this video. So we often tend to think of zoning out as a bad thing, and in some contexts it can be a bad thing, but in other contexts it's actually really not. If you think about what happens when you zone out, it's when you stop focusing on often most things, sometimes on everything, and in that moment you become absorbed in the moment. Now, some of the times this can be useful, and some of the times when we will be inclined to zone out is sometimes when we're too stressed, right? And so unconsciously our body and our unconscious mind goes, you know what? We just need some rest. We need to let go of thinking about all these things for a while. And so you do. It goes, all right, let's let go of all that. And it gives your body, your mind, a chance to get the rest that it needs. Equally, maybe sometimes when you haven't had enough sleep, or possibly sometimes if your nutrition isn't very good. You know, these sorts of situations can lead to the situation where your body, your unconscious mind decides, you know what, let's just take a rest. Let's bring things down to their simplest form, and we'll just let everything flow. So that's actually, in a way, often a really healthy coping mechanism. The flip side of that is, of course, sometimes maybe there's something that we want to accomplish, and our body, our unconscious mind thinks, hey, actually maybe we're pushing things too hard, and disagrees, and so and when we zone out, that stops us from moving forward and maybe achieving that thing that we want to achieve. So how does this compare to being in the zone? When we're in the zone, there are a lot of similar things that actually occur, because again, we let go of anything we don't need to be focusing on, and we allow ourselves to Instead of just drifting and maybe not going anywhere, like when we're zoning out, we allow ourselves to move often without conscious effort, towards whatever it is that we want to move towards. So this can be in the context of learning, it can be in the context of physical activity, it can be in the context of many things. By tuning out everything else, we allow ourselves to put all the resources of our mind, all the resources of our body into whatever our focus is. We let everything align. And when we do this, similar to zoning out, we often find that we lose awareness or conscious awareness of time. We become so absorbed in the current moment that all of our focus goes into that one thing and everything just flows. So yeah, again, not actually that much difference between zoning out and being in the zone. So if you understand one, you're probably quite close to being able to understand the other. Now, of course, so the zoning out does have some useful benefits in context. But often if we're having things that we want to achieve, what we really want is to learn how to be in the zone. And actually, rather than letting things flow and flow aimlessly, letting things flow and flow productively, constructively towards whatever our goals or objectives may be. So there are some simple things that we can do to help us to do this, to help us to get into the zone and stay into the zone. And some of those are some of the things I talked about previously, some of the things that lead to zoning out, or rather not doing those things. So making sure we have enough sleep, making sure we have good nutrition, finding ways so that we're not too stressed, we're not overloaded, right? These sorts of things are a starting point to help us have the right conditions that will help us to get into the flow and be in the zone. Beyond that, what we're after is finding just the right level of challenge and the right level of focus at the right level of detail to keep ourselves engaged within this flow, within the zone. Because if what we set for ourselves is too challenging, the stress of that will cause us to overthink, overexert, and come out of the zone. If whatever it is that we choose to focus on, work on, is not challenging enough, well, what happens is it's not interesting enough, and so our body, our unconscious mind, then wants to start to direct some of our resources to other things. And so again, rather than having this simple, pure focus and flow, our energy starts to be distracted off into other things. So, bringing this back to our Qigong practices. This concept applies in many ways, in a way, to all Qigong practices. But there are some particular practices that, well, certainly within what I teach at Long White Cloud Qigong, that we use to help us to understand, experience, and embody this principle in these states, and we call it enter the flow. Nice and simple. And with this, we work with particular movements, simple movements, and so the movements aren't what create the challenge, right? That would keep us focused. But what we do within the movements is we tune into and focus on our energy flow, and we do it in a relaxed way. And the nature of our energy flow is such that there is always more to discover. There's always more to develop. And so when we tune into that energy flow, there's something that keeps our interest, keeps our focus, and we we work to move in ways that are harmonious, that allows the energy to flow freely. So this then helps us to tune in more strongly to the energy flow. And we can become very absorbed in what we're doing and our experience of this. We do this to begin with specific movements, as I've mentioned, because they're a good learning tool to help us to learn to get into the state and to tune into our energy. As we continue with this, eventually what we move towards is being able to apply this awareness to any activity that we're doing. So you could apply it, one of the places that people often want to be in the zone is in sports, right? Because they want to have high performance, and being in that zone and having all of your resources, your mind and body resources flowing and focused on one thing is helpful for that peak performance. So by doing this and working with these movements, we can bring that awareness of our energy into a sporting practice and help use that sensitivity, that awareness of energy, to get us into the zone and stay in the zone and allow ourselves to have this sort of, I guess, almost effortless exertion, focusing all on what it is that we're wanting to do. But it goes into much more than that. This isn't something just for sports people, for athletes. We can apply it to any activity in our lives. So we can apply it to doing housework, right? And again, housework is typically something that fits into that category of there's not really enough challenge to keep us focused, or occasionally maybe there's too much challenge, I suppose, but most of the time there's not really enough challenge to keep us focused and engaged. And so there's a tendency for our awareness and our resources to start to be diverted because we get a bit distracted, and then we start to do them less efficiently and we enjoy them less, and they take longer to do, and we're more likely to develop tensions in our body and stresses and strains because we're not allowing ourselves to flow through the experience of doing that. When we bring our awareness into our body, into our energy, we can have this sense of flow, which can get us into the zone even of doing something simple like doing housework. And again, it can apply to almost any other type of activity as well. Little by little, as we practice this, we become better at entering a flow state and staying in that flow state. And we can bring this into more and more of our lives. So, yeah, I thought there were some interesting insights in comparing zoning out to being in the zone, and I guess recognizing how similar they are in ways, and recognizing how we can use that productively. Often the subtle difference between the two really comes down to having awareness and setting an intention for yourself, setting a direction you want to go into, and then rather than having your resources be dissipated, they flow in the direction that you want them to, and you can achieve a lot of good things in your life. Alright, so hopefully maybe some interesting pointers in there, things for you to think about. At the moment, those enter the flow practice that I mentioned, at the moment I only actually teach that within the Small Universe Qigong Instructor Certification program for people who are going through that and learning a whole bunch of different practices and different aspects of Qigong and putting them together so they have a deep understanding of Qigong, enough so they can teach. Or not everyone who does the program necessarily wants to teach, a lot do, but yeah, so certainly enough so that they have this understanding of concepts and theories and also experience of the practice, so that they have something really worthwhile to offer to people who they teach. But equally, some people do that course and go through that program just for their own benefit, so they can have that same depth of understanding of practice for themselves. So yeah, that's the only place I teach those right now. At some point, we did used to have a separate Enter the Flow course, and at some point I will be creating a new Enter the Flow course, just for people who just want to focus on that type of practice and learn specifically about that, maybe without going into a whole in-depth program which covers a whole lot of other things as well. If you are interested in the Small Universe program, we do have another one starting really soon actually, on the 7th of February. Yeah, so I'll put a link to that information for that in the description below if you do happen to be interested in that. Or otherwise, you might want to watch out for when maybe we release a separate Enter the Flow course, or when we run the Small Universe program again, probably later in the year. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you again soon as I hopefully get back into the swing of making these vlogs on the Chi Life channel.